Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about coaching. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, are there occasions where a newbie engineering manager is coached by a senior software engineer who is reporting to them? Yes, all the time. Because usually when you're starting in a new IT company, well, most things are going to be new to you, and that basically means that someone is going to have to teach you at least the basics of something. How, like, where's the code? What systems are you using? What services do you have in your development process? Who are, like, how do you do things? Like, what are the processes? Are you using Lean or Scrum, or what are you doing? And that's something that usually the senior software engineer might know. I mean, it's not necessarily the senior, but when you're new, it's no different. It doesn't matter. Like this hierarchy thing, where you have a boss and so forth. It's sort of to an extent, it's an immature mindset, I would say, because you might get this idea that your boss is somehow, well, for a lack of a better way of saying it, like more powerful, more knowledgeable, more worthy than you are. No, they're not. They have a job. That's what they have. They have a job which entails having authority over people. And for a lot of people who don't really understand this, uh, you have to realize that this is not like being in an industry where the value of the employee is like nothing is like nothing, like they can basically switch you out from for anybody on the streets. This is a field where experts work, and the people who have the most amount of knowledge have trained for years to know enough to figure out how all of the pieces of the systems work. The managers have none of that. Literally none of it. They have the authority to hire, fire, etc., and people management responsibility, but they have no knowledge of most of the things that are going on. That's the job of the software engineer, and they can't figure this out. It's not like a small business owner who might know their own company and like their own shop or so forth, and they're basically in a position where, no one knows more than they do about the thing. In software development, it's almost always going to be the most senior, or like the engineers who know the most about absolutely everything. And that's where it becomes more of a symbiotic relationship between the manager and the engineers, because this idea that you have from media or from other friends you might have who have like a shitty boss, etc., etc., that doesn't fly very far in software development for a company, because the reality is that the software developers, once they figure out their value, they can walk whenever the fuck they feel like it, basically. And the managers in IT are usually very, very, like, it's not that often you meet someone who is like pompous or arrogant or behaves in this way or that way, unless you have some really weird culture stuff going on. Most of the time, these are just people who are doing a job. That's all it is. I can know that mental picture, because we're almost indoctrinated from birth to follow the chain of command, or like the hierarchies and so forth. There is a hierarchy in software development, just as everything else, but it's not the way you think it might work. It's not that the manager will be most likely the least qualified person. Like the engineering manager is probably the least qualified person to run the IT department. Almost always. The reason being because they are not engineers usually. They might have been engineers as well, but their focus is people skills. They're closer to HR in terms of what they do and project management than they are anything that has to do with engineering. So for the especially in the startup worlds, guys, like the startup world, it's a joke. If you go to the startups and find your average founder or your average product owner, these are like guys and girls in their 20s. They have no fucking clue how to run an efficient IT company. I promise you that much. I've been working with many of them. They have no knowledge when it comes to setting things up or structuring things. And I have I have seen others, and I have been myself in a position where the product owner doesn't know how to run a software team. They have no idea whatsoever. This is practically their first job, or like it's not something that they've done all that much. And some of them, sure, they have on occasion some unfounded well, let's just say they might think that they know things that they don't really know, and it almost always turns out the same way. Either the seniors carry, like the senior software developers in the software team carry the company or the team, or things starts falling apart. And I've seen both happen because the managers overestimate sort of how much of an impact they actually have on the work process. And it's usually when you have a senior software developer, they're like the engineering manager doesn't have to practically get involved in anything in the work. And so usually it is the more experienced software seniors who will, because remember, the engineering manager isn't so perhaps concerned with exactly how everything about the software process works, and it differs from manager to manager, but almost all of them will need some basic introduction at the very least, some type of walkthrough of the system, the people, and like how you do work, etc., etc. Some of them have opinions and like want to be involved, some don't. But it's very, very rare that you have some type of issue or like where that this dynamic that you may have thought about exists. You can almost think of it as a little bit as imagine that someone starts a company around that where you have one person who is the CEO and one person who's like the brains of the entire product and builds all the tech stuff and so forth. Is the CEO in power over the tech guy or girl, whoever it is? Well, no, because usually when you found a company like that, you realize that someone has to have like that position and be responsible for that area, and that entails a certain amount of authority. But the value of the person who is producing all the stuff is so high that, yeah, sure, in practice you could fire this individual, but then it's like cutting off your own arm. You could do that, but why would you? It's like in practice it's never going to happen. So what I want you to take away from this is that you're absolutely in practically every company, guys, as soon as you hire a new engineering manager, that person is going to need training, and usually they're going to have to be at least a bit involved in the tech stuff. They're not going to be like a master of it, because as I said, this is not like running a small flower shop. It's not like the manager is going to know everything about the store. This is software development, and the systems are usually gigantic, and so they're gonna have to know the basics, the macro stuff, how everything works, and how you do things in like terms of like work processes and so forth. But that training and like that information, that has to come from the domain experts or the people who really know their stuff. And usually the managers are fine with just having their knowledge at that level. And so you can sort of forget about this idea that the engineering manager is either someone who knows more than you, and in some cases that's absolutely true, but for the most part that's not the case. The person who's usually the most informed about how all the things work within the company is whoever has the most senior software engineer. Those are usually the people who are going to help, and that's sort of the role that I've talked to you guys about as well. A true senior takes on as when they progress their career. At some point you're going to know so much, not just about this company that you're working for, but like overall systems development, etc., etc., that just your opinion, your input, your presence educates practically everybody around you, and that is the thing that the companies want. They want to have really experienced people who really know all the things that make up a successful software delivery process and running an IT company, so that they can raise everybody up with them. And such an individual, yeah, they have to have a manager, because there is like a company structure to every single company. It's always practically works as some form of pyramid, and they're not going to be the person. It's not that they couldn't perhaps do it. It's a question of that they have a certain responsibility and a role that they have to fulfill, and someone needs to take care of the people as well, and that's what the engineering manager is there to do. But that doesn't mean that there's some magic to the engineering manager. It's very likely that that person knows actually less than the senior, but their job that they do is still very important, and somebody has to do it. Have a great day.